Welcome to Hamburgers and Hot Rods, the podcast featuring Southern California's classic car community and its food scene. Let's get started now. Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 9 of the Hamburgers and Hot Rods podcast. My name is Jim Karras, and I am happy to spend some time with you today. The title of our show today is the All-American Originals Car Show and the Orange County Antique Automobile Club of America. Today on the show, we are pleased to welcome Mike Sherman, co-founder of the All-American Originals Car Show. Mike is also the vice president of the Orange County region of the Antique Automobile Club of America. Mike will share with us today how the All-American Originals Car Show, held each year in Tustin, California, came into being and how it sparked the reformation of the Orange County region of the AACA. But first, here is Sabrina to share with us some history and other information about AACA's national organization.
The Antique Automobile Club of America, known simply as the AACA among hobbyists, is the oldest and largest car club based in the United States, welcoming all makes and models. Founded in 1935 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, the AACA enjoys a membership count of over 60,000 members located worldwide. The AACA promotes the preservation and enjoyment of automotive history of all types and operates as a Pennsylvania nonprofit 501c3 charitable organization. The National Car Club has over 400 regions and chapters around the world, including 12 local regions here in Southern California. Today, the AACA National Headquarters is located on a beautiful campus in Hershey, Pennsylvania. The AACA offers its members and the public free access to the AACA Library and Research Center. This unique library is one of the largest and most honored libraries of its type in the world. Currently, the facility houses about 2 million individual items to help restorers and historians alike. The library also houses the collections of 12 other car clubs and organizations in its state-of-the-art facility. The library was formed in 1977 and merged with the Antique Automobile Club of America in January of 2008. Located near the AACA's national headquarters, the AACA Museum at Hershey is dedicated to the preservation and presentation of motor vehicle history in a manner that provides for the education and entertainment of its guests. Established in 1993, the museum operates as a separate legal entity and is a Pennsylvania nonprofit 501c3 educational institution. The museum's new 71,000 square foot facility opened on June 26, 2003. The museum's goal is to deliver a world-class automotive experience through innovative and interactive exhibits that appeal to all ages and illustrate the historical evolution and potential future impacts of one of the most culturally defining innovations of modern times. Offering noteworthy exhibits and an ever-growing permanent collection, the museum welcomes guests of all ages to enjoy the wonders of invention, interactive educational displays, famous and one-of-a-kind vehicles, and family fun. The AACA Museum at Hershey ranks among the top automotive museums in the world and has been recognized by the Smithsonian as an affiliate museum. The museum is home to the Kamek-Tucker Collection, the world's most extensive collection of Tucker automobiles and memorabilia. The museum also houses the Museum of Bus Transportation Collection. From its inception, AACA has had one goal: the preservation and enjoyment of automotive history of all types. From national meets and tours to regional events, AACA brings enthusiasts together through exciting national activities and friendship. The club has been recognized around the world for its award-winning 100-page full-color magazine published bi-monthly and distributed to all the club's members. The Antique Automobile is a premier national car club publication. To learn more about the Antique Automobile Club of America, you can visit the National Club's website at aaca.org.
Thank you, Sabrina. It is a pleasure to introduce Mike Sherman, who will join us in a moment to share his story about the All-American Originals Car Show and the Orange County region of the AACA. I have known Mike for over 15 years when Sabrina and I joined the Vintage Chevrolet Club of America. Mike is well known throughout Southern California as an expert in unrestored cars and over the years has belonged to many car clubs that have a focus on these cars, including the Vintage Chevrolet Club of America, Buick Club of America, Packard International Motor Car Club, and the Automobile Club of America, just to name a few. Mike has served as a chief judge for the Vintage Chevrolet Club of America for over a decade and has judged hundreds of cars of all makes and models in scores of meets and shows all over the Southland for several car clubs. Mike resides in Tustin, California, and can be found most weekends driving his original unrestored cars either to a local car show or around town. With that, please join me in welcoming Mike Sherman to the conversation.
Welcome, Mike. Thanks so much for joining us. It's really a pleasure to have you on the show today. How you doing?
I'm good, Jim. Thanks. I'm looking forward to it.
So let's get into it. I have a few questions for you, and we'll just kind of see where it goes. I've been asking everyone that's been on the show so far, your guest number 3, kind of some background things, starting with when they got their driver's license. So how about you? When did you first get your driver's license? What year?
1971, on probably my 16th birthday or a day after. Back then, we were very anxious to get driving.
I know for me, I certainly was. How about the cars that you had in high school? Do you remember your first car? And then tell us about some cars you might have had into your early 20s.
Well, yeah, this is a great story. I didn't have a car in high school. And when you went to college, your first semester, you couldn't have a car. But the second semester, they allowed freshmen to have cars. So I was living in Pittsburgh at the time, and we were driving into downtown Pittsburgh, and we were passed by a green 1956 Cadillac.
Oh, wow.
And in the back window, it said for sale and gave a number. And I wrote it down. We called the people, and for $600, I was the proud owner of a 1956 Coupe de Ville. And this was in 1974 or 73 or 74. And the car wasn't that old. I mean, it was 18 years old, which would have been like a 2001 car today.
Yes.
It looked ancient. I mean, it was absolutely, like 50, it looked 50 years old then,
Right. I got my truck, the Apache, in which is 1959. I bought that from my high school buddy in 1976. And that truck seemed ancient, so I get it. Yep, it was sure in that period. They sure changed a lot.
They changed so much. I mean, even when I was growing up with my brother in the mid '60s, when we were looking at cars, like a 1957 car in like 1965 looked old. I mean, it really looked old. So I mean, it was just amazing. Anyway, that was my very first car. And I drove it for 3 years in college. And then when I graduated, I got a new car and sold it. I think I sold it for $800. Anyway, that's the story of that.
It's kind of interesting how you could buy a used car for under $1,000 really into almost the 80s. And then they've sure gone up now. But for a long time, they just didn't really.
Well, you got to remember, new cars were only $4,000 or $5,000. So.
That's true. That's true. Yeah. And then how about your classic cars today? I know you have a couple of them. Tell us about the cars you currently
Well, I currently actually have two cars that sound very much the same, but they're actually very different. I've got a pair of 37 Packards. The big one is a Packard Super 8, and it's what they called a club sedan. So it was a 4-door car, and it sort of had a big rear pillar in it. So it looks a little bit like a limousine, but it really isn't. And then the other car I have is the other 37 Packard is the baby, and that is just a Packard coupe, a 115C, which was also called a Packard 6. And they're really totally different cars. I mean, they sort of look the same from the front, but I mean, beside the engine, the interior, and the whole build of the car, they're just really like night and day.
The coupe is really my favorite car, I think, almost of any car you've had since I've met you, that you've owned. It is really
I'm going to tell you a little secret. It's more fun to drive.
I bet it is. I really bet it is.
That coupe is like
the Super 8, The Super 8 is just a gorgeous, gorgeous, stunning piece of machinery, but that little coupe is pretty cool.
The coupe's a lot of fun. It's got a very short wheelbase, tight turning radius, and like I said, other than that, I think other than only having about 80 or 90 horsepower, it's a sports car.
What I find interesting about you and your penchant for original cars, in particular late 30s cars, is you started out, when I first met you, you had a 1939, and you migrated to 37s in a couple different marquees. Why do you think you are drawn to the 37s over the later model?
Well, I pretty much like anything from, I would say, about 35, 36 up through, probably the early 40s. That was another time when cars changed very, very quickly. I mean, if you look at a 1930, say a 1931 car and a 1941 car, I mean, it's like 30 years worth of change.
Sure.
A 31 car is primitive, and a 41 car is essentially modern. And I find that period right in between, 36, 7, 8, 9. I find that just sort of a fascinating period because, cars were changing so quickly and styling was so fluid back then. And, they were playing with streamlining and things like that.
The GM 38 and 39s across all of their brands are really stunning.
Oh, yeah. 37 to, from 37 to 41 cars look like they aged 10 years, or they're,
sure, yeah.
There was 10 years of progress. So anyway, that period has always sort of fascinated me.
One of the things that we wanted to spend a little time on today is talking about the All-American Originals Car Show. Could you share with us a little bit about how the show came to be? It is really a unique show. Can you share a little bit about how, what it was in your mind that caused you to want to found this car show?
Sure. Well, we're both in Southern California, which is generally acknowledged to be the hot rod capital of the world. And, I was going to car shows for about, probably 7, 8 years out here. And really, in many shows, 80 or 90% of the cars are hot rods or modified cars, sometimes heavily modified, sometimes slightly. And, I just sort of personally, and I don't want to sound too prejudiced or anything like that, but people that are into hot rods and modified cars, to me, aren't really car people. They're more what I call sort of the go fast people, people that want a fast and fun toy, which there's nothing wrong with it. But if you really are into cars, you've got to be into them the way they were made. And that means basically an unmodified car for the most part. And I just thought, when you enter these shows and you're surrounded by, all these heavily, modified hot rods, it's sort of a shame. And I just thought that the people that really love cars should have their own show and not have to, share 90% of the show, with very modified cars. So we just sort of thought of the idea of how about a car show for stock cars? They can certainly be restored. I certainly have nothing against restoring a car as long as it's restored basically to factory specs. I didn't think I was alone, and I thought there would be other people that would enjoy a show like that. So I sat down with a few people and we talked it through. And in fact, you're obviously one of them, and so and we just decided to start a show for cars, for basically stock cars, whether they're unrestored cars or restored to original. And that's how the show came about, and that was about 10 years ago.
Yes, the thing about the All-American Originals Car Show is it falls somewhere in between a concourse level show and just a single marquee show, such as something that the Packard Club might put on.
Sure.
But it's somewhere in between because these cars are driven. They're local cars for the most part, so few come on trailers. They are driven.
Right.
But they are still in immaculate condition, and that's what I think makes the show so unique.
I've been extremely gratified over the years with the quality of the cars we've gotten. There's clearly a lot of cars that people don't take to the average show, and that they will only bring out for a show like this. I'm just delighted when I see like a 1952 or 53 Chrysler drive up, that's just in gorgeous shape, and it's been beautifully restored and it's all stock. That's just such a good feeling to see, to see cars like that on the road being driven. And yes, it's pretty much a local crowd. We probably draw from a radius of maybe around 40 or 50 miles. But, once again, being in Southern California, there are lots and lots and lots of people and lots of cars.
The thing about the show that I really find is interesting is the first show, which was in 2010, we had about 125 cars. I think it's 127, somewhere in that round. And of those, at least half, 60 of them, came from 3 surrounding cities. Here in Orange County, the cities, the show is in Tustin. And the surrounding cities were Tustin, Irvine, Santa Ana, and Orange. And 60 cars, 50%, came from those 3 cities. And a majority of those cars I had never seen before. And that still today just is so remarkable to me that this show drew out those cars.
Well, I think for the reasons that I gave, that, people, a lot of times, there's a lot of these smaller shows that are run by people that really don't know cars. They group the cars, rather poorly, and very often there's no separation between modified and unmodified cars. In fact, I remember what really turned me off car shows for a while was I think I entered the very first Coastline Classic, I think back in 2002 or something like that. And I think the class I was in, I think I was driving my 39 Chevy, and the class I was in was just called 30s cars. Well, parked next to me was a Model A Ford replica with a fiberglass body, a giant V8 engine sticking, 6 feet tall out of the hood, and obviously a completely modern running gear. And it ended up winning the 1930s class because it was entered as a 1930 Ford or 1931 Ford or something like that. And I said to myself, I have more parts for a 31 Ford in my mouth that are on that car.
Yeah, that actually was the impetus for the show.
Yeah,
that's it right there.
And that just so turned me off, that whole idea that, because someone makes a fiberglass shell that's shaped like a 31 Ford, the car becomes a 31 Ford is patently ridiculous.
Right.
And so that, that sort of got my wheels spinning about doing, some alternative.
And then the other interesting thing that occurred once the show got off, about our 3rd year, I believe it was, the reformation of the Orange County region of the Antique Automobile Club of America. Do you recall a little bit about how that came to be, and can you share a little bit about that?
Well, I think the AACA was sort of a logical sort of parent sponsor for the show, more or less. I mean, because like you said, we deal with all different makes of cars. It's not oriented towards one particular marquee or anything like that. And they're pretty focused on unmodified original type cars. And we looked around and there was no chapter in Orange County, and I had no idea that there had been one. But I think we just talked among a small group of us and said, gee, it would be nice to have a, sort of a sponsor, or sort of to be able to put the show under the banner of the AACA, because it may bring a few more people in, and it sort of adds a little bit of weight to the show, I guess, somehow to, to have them share share a little space on the flyer. So we ended up forming the chapter, and it turns out that I think a former person in the chapter found us and brought us a whole box of stuff, souvenirs more or less, from the first incarnation of the chapter that I think disbanded probably maybe, at the time it was maybe 10 or 15 years prior, and now it's probably about 20 years ago.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, that sounds right. And Ray Chips, the president of the new Orange County chapter, has much of that memorabilia, and we use that to reimage the chapter, the region, to reimage it with the logos and all of that.
Yeah, we ended up using their basic logo, so that was fine. I thought that worked out great.
And then we had already established a judging process prior to aligning with the AACA and essentially transitioning to an Orange County region hosted car show. But we maintained our original judging. We've modified it a little bit over the years, but can you speak to the approach that we're using as a car show for judging and how it may differ a little bit from the AACA national judging that they offer at most of their events?
Well, I think the AACA national judging is goes into far more detail and time. The problem is we usually get roughly 100 cars, and we've got to judge them all in a couple hours. And we can't really spend the time, sort of going through a 400-point scale, which is what I think the AACA uses.
That's it. Yes, that's correct.
It would be far too time consuming, and we just don't have the capability to do that. So we ended up with a very much slimmed down judging sheet. I think we have 10 criteria that we look at, whether it's paint, interior, dashboard, seats, upholstery, things like that, roof, trunk, chrome, tires, things like that. And I think we, have a small weighting system that we built in, but it's basically a 1 to 10 type scale. And I think it enables our judges to get through a car, in 5 to 10 minutes, which is really certainly all we can afford to spend on a car, given our judging capabilities, because, we just don't have lots and lots and lots of judges. And the time to calculate everything with all the point system would just be, it just wouldn't fit the time frame for the show. So, yeah, it's somewhat slimmed down, but it seems to work pretty well. Unfortunately, we've had some very capable qualified judges. So that's turned out really well.
Oh, the level of judging offered at the show, the expertise is unmatched. It is a good group of judges. They certainly know the vehicles across all marquees. They come out of a lot of single marquee clubs, but they work really well together in knowing which judge makes sense for which particular car. They do a good job.
Yep.
Our chief judge since the beginning has been John Sherman, your brother. He comes from St. Louis. Can you tell us a little bit about John?
Well, John is the real car maven of the family. I mean, he was into cars literally from the age of, 3 or 4 years old. He's loved cars. And in fact, I love to tell the story that he used to draw pictures of cars in first grade and sell them to his friends. But we both ended up, loving cars. We would always walk around the neighborhood, and we would know where all the old cars were, and we would love to go and look at them. There was a 48 Chevy parked on the street a few blocks away, and on our block there was a 53 Chrysler. And like I said, these cars weren't that old. This was like in 1963, and a 53 Chrysler looked ancient. Once again, that'd be like walking over to look at a 2010 car today, which is unthinkable. John ended up going into the car business, and in fact, the classic car business. He went to work for Charles Schmidt in St. Louis just over 40 years ago now. I think in 1978 or 79, he started with Charles.
Wow.
And worked for him for a while. He worked with the St. Louis Car Museum for some years. He is currently working for Charles Schmidt's son, Dan, also in St. Louis. He's the sales manager for Daniel Schmidt and has been there probably, 10 or 15 years. So he has spent 40 years in the classic and exotic car business. They sell a lot of, sports cars, Porsches, Ferraris, but they also sell quite a few antiques and, early American stuff. He goes to most all the auctions, is active in a number of clubs. So he is really the car expert par excellence, I would say.
Well, he's just amazing and such a wealth of knowledge and, such a great personality.
Well,
He really is a people person, and he does a good job at our show with the different personalities that the judges have and the participants. Judging can sometimes be contentious, and he does a good job,
Yep.
navigating through all of that. And
oh, sure.
Really great guy.
Yep.
Tell us a little bit about the Antique Automobile Club. We've been affiliated with them for about 7 years, I think. Tell us a little bit about the club.
Well, the AACA, as you certainly know, is the oldest antique car club in the country. I don't know about the world, but certainly in the U.S. Was founded in 1935, which always makes me laugh as to what cars were eligible. And obviously back in 1935, even something like a Model A Ford would have been laughed off the lot because it would have been
right
4 or 5 years old.
Yep.
So stuff that we consider old, they didn't even consider eligible. Most of the stuff was, pre-1915, which I guess is the brass era.
Yes.
So I think you were looking at a majority of cars really dating back then from the late 1890s through the mid 19 teens, was really the focus of the group when it first got started. But I think it has been very popular over the years. It's always had, very decent membership. I think they're up to roughly 60,000 members right now or thereabouts.
Yes, I think that's right.
And around 400 chapters, of which I think about a dozen are here in Southern California.
Wow. Yeah.
So it's really something. They do a terrific magazine. It's absolutely very, very well done. And, they have interesting articles. And like I said, their focus is on, the stuff that we really like, which is, the stock American car is really their main focus. So it's an ideal club for, people that really love old American cars.
Yeah, and I think they do about 6 to 8 large national meets around the country each year. And there is the Western meet that's done. It's been held out in Palm Springs, the Quinta down in San Diego. That's a big one. There is a big active group in the Temecula region.
I think they do a big show every year in Carlsbad, don't they?
Yes, somewhere down there, yes. So those are some of the local activities that I've been aware of. And then in Los Angeles, there's a region that's been there for many, many years, the Southern California region. Sabrina and I belong to that region, and we've gone to several of their events. They do a lot of very small, unique, private collections and very just off-the-wall little points of interest, places that I've never heard of. And they certainly have some members that have been in that region, I think maybe 50 years. I mean, it's just incredible. So that's kind of cool. The Orange County region is not quite as active, but we've done some activities. Can you think of a few things over the years? We're not super organized.
No. Well, other than our car show, which is our main event for the year, I think we had a picnic or two several years ago. And for a while we were meeting at the Great Park down in Irvine, which is where the old Marine base used to be, or I think there was a training ground down there or something that they've since turned into a park. And we used to meet there on a lot of the weekends, but we haven't been extremely active recently. Of course, we sort of get together. We have the Enderle Center car show, the one that they hold twice a month. I think it's called the $1 Million Breakfast Cruise.
Right.
And so we sort of gather and talk there. But sadly, that hasn't been going on for the past several months, and not sure when it'll happen again.
Right.
But hopefully before too long. Yeah.
Ray Chip's pretty much organized that. He's the president.
Yeah.
He does a good job, and he's really the glue of the region for sure.
Certainly does.
Yep. And then they don't really have meetings. I think they do one a year or something, if I remember.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. How about new members? How would someone, if they were interested in joining the region, do you have any thoughts on how they could do that, and are they welcome?
Oh, sure. We certainly welcome new members. We would love to add some members, and I think on the AACA website, I think there is a listing for the Orange County chapter that lists Ray. And I'm not sure if it gives his email, but if you would contact him by email, I'm sure he would be happy to provide any material necessary to join. Like I said, also come by the $1 Million Breakfast Cruise when it starts up again, or certainly attend the next All-American Originals show, which I think hopefully should be sometime next year at this point.
Right.
So that's sort of what we're hoping to achieve, if we can get that back on track.
We were scheduled for July, but it looks like that's not going to happen this year.
I don't think so, unfortunately. Yeah.
So we'll postpone it. Since we started, this will be the second year we missed out. We took a break 1 year.
1 year, yeah.
And boy, we caught heck for that. That was for sure.
Yeah, people were very upset. They really do enjoy the show. I can't tell you how many people that tell me that it's a show they look forward to, and so many people say how much they enjoy the show.
There is a website for the car show. Can you tell them what that is? I'll put a link too in the show notes.
Yeah, put up a link. I think it's just allamericanoriginals.org, I believe.
Yep, that's right. Yep.
And it's all one word. There's no spaces, just allamericanoriginals.org.
Great. Do you have any final thoughts for us?
Not really. I've enjoyed talking to you, Jim. It's been good. I look forward to listening to the podcast.
All right. Well, thanks so much. It's been wonderful. You do a great job. You and Ray and John are just amazing.
Well, as do you, certainly. You're a big help.
I've sure enjoyed it.
And thank your lovely wife, Sabrina, for all the hard work that she does for the show also.
I definitely will. She always looks forward to it. Okay, enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks a lot, and that's it.
Thanks, Jim.
Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye.
I want to thank Mike Sherman for joining us today. Mike has a wealth of knowledge about classic cars, original cars. We just touched the surface on his knowledge base. He definitely is one of the solid resources locally for several car clubs when consulting about originality is needed. If you are interested in the Orange County region of the AACA, they do have a website. You can visit their website at OC-AACA.org. There you can send a message to their president, Ray Chips, and find out a little bit more about their activities and about their club. In our next episode, we will welcome Ron Marciano from the Personalized Chevrolet chapter of the Vintage Chevrolet Club of America, known as the PCC throughout the VCCA. Ron will share with us how the PCC came to be, its purpose, and what sets it apart from other VCCA regions and chapters. As a longtime VCCA member, Ron has vast knowledge about the National Car Club, and he is also highly active in his local VCCA home region, in addition to serving as the director of the PCC. While the VCCA has a mission to preserve and restore Chevrolets, the PCC was established to provide VCCA members with an opportunity to share with other fellow members their enthusiasm for personalized Chevrolet cars and trucks. Ron will share about the PCC judging process offered to its members and how, unlike traditional VCCA regions, which are local VCCA chartered car clubs, participation in the PCC, including its judging process, is available to members around the country. If you are into mild modified Chevys, Ron has some information that most certainly may be of interest to you. Please join us for our next informative episode of the Hamburgers and Hot Rods podcast. That's it for this episode. We hope you enjoyed your time with us today. You can visit us online at hamburgers&hotrods.com, where you can check out our show notes, listen to our complete show library, as well as checking out all of the various platforms where our show can be heard. Until next time, thanks for listening. We'll see you then.